and he thankfully he never had to have an amputation.
Oh,
But,
wow.
his wife said that one of the mercies of God was that the Lord took him before that happened, because it looked like that was coming. But man, diabetes ravaged him, and he would have to go get shots in his eye. He would have to constantly go to a doctor for his feet. She said he took 20 pills a day. You know, and it was just really, really tough on him. But eventually, basically, his arteries were pretty corroded, and she was talking to him. He was at his computer. She went upstairs. She came back, and he was gone. And basically, it just closed up his heart. But he was a godly man. He was a good man. And it was a great funeral. It was just a wonderful time of praising God. And I'm just very thankful for it.
Yeah. Wow.
He asked me to preach it, so I was happy to do that.
All right. That's something when you have a lot of your people who've been with you for a number of years leave us.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I've had to go through that. And my last one was a dear sister in the faith. We would tease the church because we were both so young. I think she was somewhere in her late 70s, and I believe it was cancer that took her. But it's sad when so many people who started out with you, you know, leave you. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's honorable to leave in death. You know, I mean, none of us have the choice of that. That's something that God decides. But sometimes people leave us just because they don't like us, or because you know there's conflict. Or you know, like marriages. You know, it's one thing for your spouse to pass away. It's another thing that your spouse walks away and divorce. So there are different kinds of griefs in the world. And, you know, like somebody said, good grief, you know, and I do think there are good griefs and there are bad griefs. And, you know, with this brother, I had to sit down and talk to his family because there was a lot of hurt and pain between them and the church. And this happened after I left, but a lot of bitterness. And, you know, I gave them the talk that I give to a lot of people at the graveside. And I say, listen, if you have anything in your heart against this person who has just passed, or if you feel guilty because you didn't do what you should have done for this person who has just passed, or you have some bitterness towards other people who may have mistreated him, now's the time to come to the cross and let it go. You know, you don't need to carry bitterness past the grave. You need to let the Lord deal with you and cleanse you. And she, you know, his widow heard me. And even at the funeral, she started repairing some damage. So I was so grateful to hear that.
Wow, that's great. That is great. Wow.
So let me ask you a question. So you're saying you did that at the grave site or during the sermon?
Well, in this case, I met with the family the day before the funeral.
Okay.
And that's when I spoke to the issue.
Okay. So when you guys are at the actual gravesite for the interment, what is your procedure for that part of the service? What do you both do?
Well, what do we both do? Randy, what do we both do?
Well, I have, I try and I try to remember to do a couple of things. One is I want to point people to the resurrection and give them that hope. And, there's a committal service, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. We now commit the body of our brother or sister to the ground as we commend his soul to God in the sure and certain hope of the resurrection of the dead when the Lord Jesus Christ shall appear with all his angels. And essentially, that's the committal service that we give. But before that, if I haven't done it at the eulogy or the sermon, I will take the time to talk about dealing with bitterness and forgiveness, because so many people are really racked up. A lot of their grief is exponentially elevated because they feel guilty. They feel ashamed that here I am at the graveside and I stopped talking to him 3 years ago. Or I never came to see him in the hospital, or I never asked him to forgive me, or sought his forgiveness, and you got to, I just found it healthy to help people confront that openly.
Well, that's interesting because I remember the last funeral that I had, the same committal service, the dust to dust, ashes to ashes, but the funeral director was just not communicating well with me at all. So when I had called people and assembled people to come and assemble by the casket, we were going to start the committal. The funeral director didn't tell me that he didn't escort the family up yet. They were still in the car. So, you can't have a committal service with the family still in the limousines. So I had to stop and wait until he brought them up. And I thought that usually the funeral director or the associate will speak to you. We'll say, okay, it's time. Thank you. I'm turning this over to you.
Right.
When we commit this body, earth to earth, ashes to ashes. It's like it caught him totally off guard that I was going to do that. So he didn't have anything ready for that. So he grabbed some flowers after I said it, and he did it. Usually the funeral directors are there, and they're just right with you. And then after that, there was just no communication. And I said to myself, I should write a nice, not a nasty letter, but a nice letter, just explaining, I appreciate working with you. There were a couple areas that I didn't think you and I were together. Because this gentleman didn't own the funeral home. In my opinion, it's owned by a white brother. And I'm assuming that this black brother is there for the funerals where there's a lot of black folk. But he just was not communicating. Even at the funeral, when it was all over, I called for the funeral director to come in and give the people the final directions. That's what you usually do.
Yeah.
I couldn't find him. He wasn't in the back. He wasn't on the side. So this is so funny. So a gentleman had just walked in at the end of the funeral. I'm looking for the funeral director, and he said to me, "Can I sing?"
Oh my God!
I looked at the family on the row, the first row, and they didn't know whether they should say yes or no. So I took their ambivalence as a no. I said, no, you can't. We just finished this. You can do this at the repast. And again, I'm still looking for the funeral director would have handled all of that. I had to leave the pulpit, walk across the entryway into another room, and knocked on the door while everything is over and they're getting ready for the final recession. I had to go, could you come into the room, please, and get people to. I have never experienced a funeral like that before in my life. And I just felt like maybe this person was smoking something. I can't believe that this is how he functions at all of his funerals. Have you ever had a funeral director or an assistant who was not in sync with you during a funeral before?
Well, the funeral directors, like everybody else, some have experience and are really professional, and some are like brand new. They're just learning the business. Usually funeral homes are family owned, and so it's like generation after, the grandfather, the father, and the son, they're all, they grow up in it. They're trained in it. And some of the most professional people I've ever met are in the funeral home business. They know what they're doing. But so when you meet somebody who's brand new to it, or, maybe he's just taken over a funeral home, he just decided to go into the business, but he's never really had any mentoring. Boy, you can really see the difference between somebody who knows what to do. And there have been some funerals where basically I had to take over as the pastor because I was the most experienced person in the room,
right,
to know what should happen. And I've had to do that at weddings and funerals suddenly, where somebody looked at me and said, Randy, can you help us practice this wedding? Because there's nobody here to show us. And that even happened in one of the members of Joan's family. Joan's mother came to me and said, okay, pastor, get up and fix this.
Wow. Yeah, well, I have never experienced something like that because I felt that there's no one in charge, and I was not clear what the final instructions were from the family to the funeral director. So you got to be careful that you don't get caught in that kind of a crossfire, because you might sing a song. And even at funerals now are so different. I know people who have lost loved ones and they didn't call the pastor. They cremate the body, so the body's not there. And they just gather people together. And a very unique one, very recently, the body was cremated. They went to a park and everybody brought balloons, and everybody could say whatever they wanted to say one at a time. And rather than having a eulogy, they let the balloons go and that was it. But I'm just finding so many different ways that people now who are not involved in the life of the church at all are doing it. They're now taking over and doing it their own way. Have either of you experienced anything like that?
Well, in a way, one, I think it's important to have someone in the church with you during these things who could help guide the family or the folks during this time. But I will say that there's been times when, and it's one particular family in the church that they just took over. They, I mean, from the memorial service on, we have a time when the day before the actual funeral service, we'll have a service in the church where the folks are there with the body, and there we're allowing you to make your comments and things like that. We do that then rather than do it on the day of the funeral, because it could just go long and really bad, So I have a person usually there who will help me and help the family get through this moment. From the time of the viewing before the service, and also on the day of the service, and even to the grave. So again, the focus is on that the real individual is with the Lord now, and that's what we do.
I found it really helpful to, if you have a relationship with the family, I mean, they're in your church, they're your people, then as a pastor, you hear somebody died, you need to call them right away. And, and you need to find out how much they have done on their own. There's some people they said, oh, yes, Pastor, we've already talked to the funeral home. You know, we have a prepaid plan. You know, we know exactly what we're going to do, and we'd like you to do this. And some people will be like that. They're ready. Other people are totally clueless, and they'll say, Pastor, I don't know what to do. Who do I call? You know, and so I go down kind of a list in my mind with them and say, have you chosen a funeral home? And when you go to the funeral director, these are the kind of things that are going to happen. These are the questions they're going to ask of you. And you need to be prepared for that. And some people have found that very helpful for me to just coach them through that whole process, because, you know, we're all going to die, but a lot of people act like it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, they keep putting it off. You know, I'm not going to think about it. And then they have to think about it at one of the worst moments of their life, when they're full of sorrow and shock. And they've got to make decisions that are going to cost them thousands of dollars.
That's right.
And so as a pastor, you can help them to say, look, you don't have to do everything a funeral home asks you to do.
Right.
You know, because they'll charge you for almost everything.
Right.
That's
then,
right.
And as a pastor, I'll say, if they were a member of the church, I'll say, I really want you to have the funeral at the church, you know, because it's a worship service. Now, it's their choice. They can do whatever they want. But a lot of times they'll do a little bit, like they'll think of the service, but they won't think of the graveside. They won't even ask the pastor, oh, will you come to the graveside to do the committal? So sometimes I've just sort of stuck myself there, and we get there and it's obvious I'm the guy who's supposed to do it.
Right.
But you got to coach people.
Sometimes the mortician or the funeral director will take that aspect of it and do it all themselves. They're ready to go if you're not. Have you guys ever had a funeral where on the program it had everything flowing, but a member of the family got up during their time to say what they were going to say, and then they said, if anybody has anything that they would like to say today, you can put one line over to the right, we can put another line over to the left. And I said to this gentleman before he did that, don't do that, because he was talking about doing it. I said, don't do that, because the funeral director has a certain allotted time, a certain time that they have to be at the cemetery, because there are other people who have died, and they're going to be backed up like trains. And so the person disregarded what I had to say. People started to line up, and you know what that can turn into, especially if it's a man or woman who died, who was a player, and the girlfriends come in, and the wife never knew that there was somebody else. I've seen some of those things before. And so the man gets up, the lines are on both sides of the church. I had a choice. I had a choice to dismiss them all myself and risk being attacked, or speak to the gentleman and say to him, you created this, now you've got to fix it. Let them know that they can do this at the repast. We're not going to do it now. And he apologized to me, and he did it. And people will accept the family saying, no, we made a mistake, we're not going to do this now. You have to be a pretty strong pastor to stand up against all of those people and say it in a way that they're going to hear you and not bum rush you on the pulpit and still do what they want to do. There's so many different aspects to this thing.
Yeah.
So have either of you? Go ahead, Stephen.
I remember at one funeral, a member of the family got up and said, I had this until such and such time. Almost like this was like I don't know, but she said that, and I had to get up and correct her. So you do have. What about this? What about when you have people that want all this, I don't know, pomp and circumstance at the funeral, and they don't have the money? That's a tough one.
Yeah.
So what would that consist of, though? I don't know what that would consist of.
Well, they want more time in the church. Again, when you're looking at the fact that I don't know if Tennessee has it, but and I'm pretty sure, but grave sites at for funerals on a Saturday is, I believe, it's after 12. It becomes time and a half. So
Isn't that the
you
family's
have that time.
obligation and responsibility, whatever happens with
Yeah,
something
you
like
try to
that?
tell them. You try to be polite and tell them that you don't have all this time, and
Mm,
some just will learn the hard way.
mm.
Mm.
Yeah, it's funerals cost a lot of money, and people need to be wise and to plan for it. And like, especially if you're a veteran and you're going to be buried at a national cemetery. We have a very large one here in Chattanooga. And usually you are allotted 30 minutes because the funerals can be backed up. I mean, you can literally see lines of cars with a hearse, and you got 30 minutes when they set you up to do the committal service, and then you need to be going your way so the next funeral can come in right behind you.
Right.
And so that is something you'll have a representative there from the National Cemetery. He's standing right there, and you can tell if he's pushing you, like, got to go, and that includes, because they'll do the bugle, they'll do the firing of the rifles, folding of the flag, and then you get to say your piece as a preacher and pray for them, and then it's okay. We take the body back in the hearse, we take it to the place at the cemetery where they're going to lay it down, but we got to get you folks out of there.
Right.
And that can be a little nerve-wracking. And and that translates back to the church, because you're scheduled to be there at 1 p.m. That means you got to leave the church no later than 12:30. So if you're going to start the funeral, you got to say, hey, this is how much time we got. Now, we've done funerals where we've had open mics, and usually that's only because we had it was not a military funeral. It was not at a veteran cemetery. We had a little lead time, but I've often said to people, I will stand up here. You will only have a limited amount of time to say something. And if you keep talking, you'll hear me cough into the microphone or ahem. You're going to get the signal, and you need to sit down when you hear that, so the next people can talk. But not every preacher is mean enough, like I am, to do that.
Yeah, we've had to do that a couple times. Now, what about at the grave site, when you have finished doing all that you were supposed to do and it's done, and then there's either another pastor there who doesn't think that you didn't give them enough, or they just wanted to start praising God with their gospel songs, and so they just start singing. The funeral director looks at me, and I looked at the funeral director. The men who are going to put the body in the ground are just waiting around. They're getting paid too, and they want to get ready to go to the next funeral, and someone starts singing. So I feel that when the pastor is through, that should be it. It's okay to sing while the body's going down, but to stay there and have another service is something you can't do. That's usually the responsibility of the funeral director, to speak to the people to say, now can you please return to your cars? If a funeral director does that and people are not listening, rebuffing whatever he says, challenging him, then I'd step up. I have my robe on. I'll step up and I'll say something, and usually they'll respect that level of authority and they'll back away. So do you allow people to sing? Or, I hate to tell you this, but there have been times when I couldn't stop it, and I said to myself, I've done my part. I go to my car. I'm out. I'm
Exactly.
in my car. That's
That's
your
right.
responsibility. I say to the funeral director, that's why you're getting the big bucks. You gotta handle that. And I'm
That's
gone.
right.
I'm
Yeah.
saying, but I got my hand up, my finger up, and I'm walking away.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm in my car. And that's why when I drive up, I put my car way at the front.
In the
So
front. Right.
I'm not blocked in by all the other cars because that
Right.
now you can go to your
Yeah.
car, but now you gotta sit there while all those angry people come looking for
Uh,
you.
uh-huh.
Stop beating on your car. Man, we
Well,
could,
here in Jersey, the funeral directors that I've worked with have been wise enough to, after I do the committal, say, this concludes
yes,
Yes.
that's the key
your
Yes.
word.
service for
Yeah.
Joe Jones,
Yes.
and we want you to return your car.
Yes.
And that's helped out a lot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Do you
I'm not the graveyard policeman.
right?
You know, if once the funeral home director says that, or I say that, this concludes our services, you know, God bless you. And family, a lot of times, if there is no expectation that you got to go right away, people will kind of hang around and hug each other and even take pictures. That's fine. But you, as the pastor, you can go, you
That's
know,
right. Uh-huh.
or you can say, you can say, hey, there's a meal, a repast is going to be served in 1 hour at the church. You're all welcome to come or whatever, get on out of there,
Right,
Yeah.
but you're out of there.
Well,
Right.
Bruce is wise said, and I do the same thing. I put my car way in the front, past the tractor and everything else, so that when it's over, I'm out of there.
Right.
And
Right.
speaking of the funerals of a veteran, the National Cemetery is like around 60 miles away.
Wow.
So a lot of times I'll do the committal at the church.
Mm,
I'm not driving that far,
right.
and mm,
I've never had one of those where I don't know what I would do if it was like 100 miles away. So that's 200 miles to go for the interment. I've never had one like that. But I'm sure I would have had to resolve that the day before. So if the committal is done at the church, when they go to the cemetery, all it is that they get out the car. People want to pray, don't they? Who leads that? Who does that if the pastor's not there?
If
well,
families don't coordinate with you,
Yeah.
it's so important to communicate, what do you want? What do you need from me?
Yeah.
And you can tell people, gosh, I'm not able, I can't go 100 miles. But if somebody asked me and they said, Pastor, we're going to do the funeral, but the next day we're taking it 100 miles.
Right.
We really want you to come. If
Yeah.
they asked me, I would do it. I would try. But usually
Yeah.
they would also probably say, and we'll pay your expenses. We'll take care of that. Okay.
Right.
uh,
Right. 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 Right.
well,
Okay. Is lobster included in the expenses? Can I put that on the
oh,
bill? But the other thing is
yeah.
that if the funeral director is driving the next day, or if the funeral director is driving that day, you could always ride with the funeral director. So you could just, take a nap on your way there and take your nap on the way back.
Yeah.
I've done that, not because it's a long distance. I just didn't feel like taking my car. So I've jumped in and I say to the person who's driving, how you doing? And I speak to the deceased who's in the back, and you, and
Oh,
we just take right off.
Yeah.
You've gone with the funeral director, right?
oh boy. What about this? What about during a funeral service? You have, and it's something that I don't recommend. You have family members. They want to pray. They want to read the scripture and everything else. And I kind of tell them, no, why don't you let some other folks do it?
Let
You
some
might
other
not
folks
be
do it, right?
prepared. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And at one we did it, and they had these. I think it was his grandchildren,
Mhm.
and they wanted to read the scripture and everything, but they couldn't read. You know,
Oh,
Mm,
they were reading like second graders,
mm,
and they kept going on and on and on and on, and it was sad that you had these adults who couldn't read.
So there's no way of knowing that ahead of time, right? There's no way
That's
to
right.
ask that
That's
question.
right.
Yeah, those are things that happen that you don't prepare for. Sometimes you miss it.
Yeah, you got to roll with the punches, as they say, and love on people. The funeral I did yesterday, I mean on Sunday afternoon, the widow, she had written out, she wanted to speak. And so she got up and she read her remark.
Guys, keep going. I gotta go answer the door. Keep going.
He's leaving us again, Stephen. Just abandoned ship.
As always.
But this widow, she had a good statement. I was very proud of her, and she was actually funny. And there are some people who can do that. There are other people who are just falling apart.
Yeah.
You can't get out one sentence without weeping. And then everybody's sitting there in agony saying, take your time, sister, take your time, and I'm going, no, don't take your time.
That's right. Yeah. We had one where the widow couldn't even get out the car at the grave.
Wow.
And, she just stayed in the car. So she was so broken up.
Yeah.
And oh boy.
Down here, especially if in the Black church, if you are a friend of the family and you are visiting, you are a pastor, but you're not their pastor, but you walk in and they recognize you as a pastor, they're going to bring you up on the platform. And they're going to ask if you have any remarks.
Yeah.
And, I've been honored, at many Black funerals to walk in and they say, Pastor Nabors, come on up, get on the platform and, either say a prayer or say some remarks or read a scripture.
Right.
And sometimes I've not met any of the pastors who are up there, and I don't know what they're going to say. So, I try just very shortly to talk about the gospel and talk about the resurrection, even if it's just a couple of sentences, because sometimes you get some preachers up there who they don't give the gospel. They say some nonsense, and you go, what are you here for? To me, funerals are the great moment in a person's history when the gospel can be preached over their body.
Amen.
And here's go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I just think the danger is when you got a Christian who's in your church, he loves the Lord, but none of his family are saved, and they control the funeral. And you go, man, this brother, he is up in heaven just saying, oh no. And you got to tell people, you got to give some instructions. If nobody in your family is a Christian, do not let them give you a non-Christian funeral.
That's right.
Right. So when you're meeting with the family, I have a lady in the church, one of the pastors, who is very good at managing the family and giving all the details. So we'll go to the home together. And I let her lead the discussion because she just does it flawlessly. And she does the 1-2 punch so that by the time I speak, they're all punched out. I got them. And then I'm able, but I think that I would be I am very clear as to what my role is and the kind of message that I'm going to be giving. And if I'm not conforming the message to align to what you believe.
Yeah.
And in many instances, you don't believe anything. So I may not be the right person to do the funeral for you. And I want to get that out as soon as I can so that they can go find somebody else.
Yeah. I always depend on my Amos scripture, prepare to meet your God. And I will use that when I'm asked to speak, as a guest preacher or something like that, I use that scripture. So, it just challenges us, prepare to meet your God.
Yeah.
And, that's what we need to do. And, and sometimes I've done that and then made a stop at the repast at somebody's house. And I have some of the members there who's been, well, shall I say, well, call it as it is, who was drunk and want to tell me how great of a job I did. And I'm smelling Seagrams on them or something like that,
You can tell you've had experience with the liquor because you can actually tell the brand of whiskey that they've been drinking. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. I might have some in the car, but the funny thing about funerals is when I just moved down here, and it was at the funeral. No, it was at the Roosevelt Cemetery, and the girl was so broken up when they brought the body down. She jumped in the grave too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
actually in the grave? I've never had
Uh-huh.
one of those. I think I've had someone slip and fall, but I don't ever recall anybody jumping in.
And I thought I was being a gentleman, and I offered her my hand to get up and to get out, and she scratched me, so I had to let her go. So,
Oh,
Stephen, how did she get out?
She got
Oh,
out.
they didn't pour the dirt on. They didn't pour the dirt on her too, along with the casket. That's because that's illegal. You can go to jail.
I'm telling you, she put a good scratch on me, and yeah, and I brought my hand up like that. No, she was still down.
Wait a minute, Stephen.
What?
You said you had a good scratch on you. Is that what you told your wife that it happened at the gravesite at the funeral? Is that what
When
you
I
told her?
told her, I think I told her when we got home. But yeah, she was but I'm trying to remember if Denise was there. But it was oh boy.
Yeah.
But again, when we look at the funeral as a graduation service, that you are now with the Lord, you are now a member of the church triumphant. That's healthy. But when you get all this gnashing of teeth and everything, and oh boy.
There's no doubt that our job as preachers of the gospel, that people expect us to give a word of comfort, word of assurance, but we are there to proclaim the truth and not to make up stuff. And I always enjoy saying that at a funeral. I'm so glad to be at a funeral where I'm not trying to preach him into heaven or make up a life that he didn't live. The funeral I did on Sunday afternoon was of a godly man, had been faithful to God, been faithful to his wife. His children held him in high regard and respect, and to me, that's one of the convicting things when I go to a funeral and maybe at the wake or at the repast or even at the funeral itself, the children get up and talk about the father as a godly and good man. Boy, am I convicted. And I think, man, will my children be able to do that? That when I go, that they would be able to say, my father loved Jesus and I always saw it in his life. And he was a man of integrity. And, I sometimes I come back saying, man, my kids will never be able to say what those kids said about their dad.
Well, because you said that today, When I get home, I'm going to call all three of my children and set dates and times when I can sit with each of them and start rehearsing them on what they. This is what you're going to say. This is what you're going to say. This is what you're going to
Uh,
say. And I'll
uh,
trust that mom. I'll trust that mom's going to say the right thing. I mean,
Bruce, that's cheating. That's cheating. You gotta
Listen,
let them
I'm
be
not.
honest.
No, I don't want them to be honest. I want them to. You know, one of the
uh, uh,
things. Go ahead, Stephen.
Bruce, will they, at your homegoing, will Karen say, go up there and see if that's your father in there? You know?
Right,
You
after
know,
you two speak, say,
uh,
you go up and see if that's your father in there, because I didn't know that. But you know, I sometimes dread, and it doesn't happen often because I'm really becoming more reclusive these days. There's so many community leaders of Reverend Hayes's age and stature, the 90s, the 92, the 96, who are now dying. And a lot of them didn't have a faith in Jesus Christ. And their funerals are just different, where people just, all they do is come up and talk about what they did in the community. There's no faith in Jesus Christ, there's no
That's true.
God, there's no heaven. It's just, right. And I know that if I'm called to come up and say a word, I know what I need to do.
Mm.
And I'm gonna do it, but I try to avoid getting called, because I want to be consistent. I'm receiving an award in June, and the lady asked me, "Oh, we lost Randy."
Oh,
Randy he was receiving an award and said, I can't take this.
okay.
Randy,
Hopefully this comment about receiving a reward is relevant to the
did
conversation.
did I say reward? I didn't say award.
Award, yeah, award.
Okay, award. And listen,
Keep going. Keep going.
Randy, that's why you put that.
I love audibly. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's award, A,
All right.
not re.
I got you.
Okay. Man, Randy ran away from that real quick. I'm not gonna give him one. But anyway, so I'm receiving an award in June, and there was a photo shoot, so I had to have my picture taken. And then the other thing they wanted is that they wanted us to put together in 300 words what we want said about our lives. You know, I couldn't do it. I actually couldn't do it. So I said, Karen, you do it. I want you to do it. Whatever you say that you see in me and my history in the city, I'll let it go with it. I couldn't do that. I just felt like I couldn't tell my own story because I felt like I'd either be bragging or trying to make it sound good. And I felt that I could trust my wife. So Karen worked on it, and the lady called me, sent me a text yesterday or 2 days ago and said, I only needed 300 words. You gave me 500 words. Can you reduce it? I didn't want to do that. I wouldn't know what to cut out. And I didn't feel like talking about myself. So I said to the lady, you go ahead. You've known me all your life. Whatever you choose to represent me, she's a Christian. I said, I'm good with it. That's very hard for me to talk about myself, especially because there's a temptation to want to write something that's good about yourself. But I know how I see myself. I'm more concerned about my walk in my city and how people see my walk. That's important to me, right? And so if people invite me to a funeral, it's a non-Christian funeral, and they ask me to speak, the honor is they know who I am. They know who I live for. And to ask me to speak, they know what I'm going to say, is to me a height of respect.
Mm.
And that's why no one calls me to impromptu at the funeral. But I want to be consistent. I want people to know that that's who I represent. So if you call me, that's where I'm going. I won't be long, but that's where I'm going.
Well, it's better for her to say, this is too long. We got to cut it back, to say, your wife only came up with 50 words. You think we could, there's a little, make something up. you know?
Yeah.
No, I didn't think about it that way. If she had said, there's only 49 words here, well, I need about 300, I would have said, call Stephen Davis and Randy Nabors, and they will fill in what's not there.
We'd
And
be happy to do that.
them. Yes, I'm sure you would.
I'll give a few sentences on you.
Guys, the time we have left, did I share with you already about the horrifying experience that I had 2 months ago with a hawk was waiting for something to eat at the cemetery, and they released the doves and the hawk?
Yeah, you told us about that.
That is, I mean, I'm still traumatized by that experience. The children were traumatized, first of all. Oh, look at the nice white birds taking flight. Look at the feathers all over the place. What? The kids didn't know what had attacked. At least they didn't know why all the feathers were flying around and why the other doves were hiding on the cars.
Yeah.
That was terrible. I mean, I hate to ask this question, but either of you two might know. Do hawks normally sit at a cemetery looking for, I don't know, what are they doing at the cemetery? Or was that just was that a fluke that it would just so happen on the same day
Bruce,
that the doves were released?
The hawk does not know it's a cemetery.
Okay, but it knows that there's bodies out there, right?
It does.
Or maybe they know that people bring doves to this place. All I know is the way I'm telling the story, I'm still traumatized. That's all I got to say.
The hawk is sitting there saying, "Oh, look, these people are bringing another offering to me." I'm so glad they're giving me my lunch.
I've never seen them at a cemetery, but across the street from where I live, there were some. They weren't doves, but they were on the ground, and Jimmy the Hawk came down from the sky, and grabbed them and went up.
Wow.
Yep.
That's terrible. Guys, we have 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 3 minutes. I can't believe that you two took all the time.
Hey, Steve, before we leave, why don't you tell our listeners what you meant by the church triumphant?
Yes, that's good.
Well,
and don't mess up.
In terms that the church is already victorious because of the work on the cross that was done. So we're triumphant. We're victorious over that. And in heaven, good Lord, we're gonna be there with Jesus. And his work on the cross has made the church triumphant.
Triumphant over what? What have they won the victory over?
Amen. And often I'll hear people, and I've even heard songs where they talk about victory, and I'll ask them, victory over what? And they might give me all types of, crazy stuff. But, our victory is in the cross on Calvary, what was done for us, and I was like, oh, yeah, I never thought about that. So, all types of folks,
So victory over sin and the grave.
And the grave, yes. That we're victorious. And I even tell our young people, be careful what you're singing about, because sometimes you might not know what you were singing about, and even sometimes even the hymn writers or the songwriter might not even know. He might victory over such and such. Yeah, but where does that victory come from? From the work on the cross. That's where we're victorious over.
You know, the only thing that was left out of our time today, and we're not gonna have the time to talk about it, but maybe next week can pick up on it. I wanted to know about your time with Oliver Tremune, because I saw Stephen with Oliver. And Randy, were you going to come up to spend some time with the three of them, the two of them?
No.
Oh, yeah. I thought you typed something on Facebook asking how long is he gonna be there?
Oh,
I just said it was good to see. But
Oh,
yeah, Oliver got back. He was actually at the funeral on Sunday afternoon. I spoke to him
Okay.
yesterday,
okay, good.
but he was happy to have seen Stephen. I don't know why, but he was
I
happy.
don't know why. I don't know why either, but you know, I don't
the,
know.
we spent a good hour together in my kitchen over